Oh, I was just gonna say. I mean, we try to stick to a schedule, but this podcast is just a hobby, basically. And
If anybody thinks that this is professional, it might be a career aspiration ultimately, but yes, I hope that this comes off very hobby-like to our 3 dear listeners.
yeah, and yeah, sometimes we're just too busy. But what I will say though is that what I said before is still true. There is always still an episode on the back burner. The show, we'll announce that the show is over if when it ends before it ends. So if you don't hear the show's over, there is an episode lurking out there that is still true.
Creeping. Hello, and welcome to the Weekly Artifact. This is a tri-weekly podcast created by 2 friends who met in undergrad and
Sorry. How you can't just say tri-weekly with a straight face? Come on.
I gotta be a little tongue-in-cheek about it.
I don't know. You can say it if you want. I just had to laugh there. I could not laugh.
Hello and welcome to the Weekly Artifact. This is a tri-weekly podcast created by 2 friends who met in undergrad and against all odds decided to keep talking to each other. I'm your host, Alex, joined by my co-host and future groomsman, Justin.
Hello, I'm Justin.
Oh, I full sure said Justin.
Oh yeah, you did. That's true.
Well, that whole thing we cut out, but
you can edit it. I'm Justin. The internet moves fast. The hot takes of today are less than a distant memory by tomorrow. We're here to slow down and recover the content that's been lost along the way in order to make sense of where the world was, where it is, and where it will be. To that end, we've each chosen an artifact from the web to discuss together.
Our comments are our own and are not associated with any institution. The show may contain explicit language or themes. See the show note for specific content warnings. Justin, what do you got, bud?
My artifact this week is an essay called "The Privatization of Childhood" by Megan Erickson, and it's from Jacobin again. I know I've reached into that well at least once, I think twice already, but whatever. They put out good stuff, and we're going back. So it came out in 2015. And it's basically just about what sort of, I guess, like the connection between capitalism and childhood. So it starts off talking about how it says nearly half of American children born to parents with low incomes grow into adults with low incomes, and 40% of children born to wealthy parents become high income adults. And it goes on to talk a little bit more about some of the stats about sort of the myth of social mobility, and how even with it being a myth, it still kind of influences a lot of policy, such as welfare programs, particularly thinking about like attempts to cut welfare that really ramped up under Bill Clinton. And then it talks about also putting this in context of how wages have not increased, and in some cases even gone down a little bit in terms of real wages since the 1970s, as adjusting for inflation. Although the 1% has risen 165% for their wages, and that's mostly in the form of capital income.
I mean, good for them, I guess. Must be nice.
So it's basically just laying out how stratified class has become, despite the fact that I won't say most, but a lot of people still don't necessarily realize it or think about classes being stratified in that way. And it sort of talks about how we still use the language of poverty rather than language that might help us think about some of these issues, and it suggests terms such as wealth inequality, class disparity, or class war. So this is all sort of the backdrop, and then it starts to talk a little bit more about families and children. So one quote here, it says, Meredith Phillips estimates that from birth to age 6, children from affluent families have spent 1,300 more hours in environments beside their home, school, or daycare than children from low-income families. Wealthy parents have the luxury of time to impart knowledge essential to understanding science and social studies to their children, beginning in early childhood through exposure to travel, museums, and even simple excursions like going to the supermarket or the post office. Yeah, and so it sort of talks about, it says the family has become an economic unit, which is another sort of important thread that continues on. Skipping ahead a little bit, it just talks about a bunch of different products that you can buy that's supposed to sort of like help your baby to grow and learn and become a genius and all this stuff. And then has one of my favorite quotes from the article, even though I think there's a little unpacking to do with it, but that says, tearing construction paper is a challenging task for a 2-year-old, which helps develop fine motor skills, as is gathering leaves or cutting with scissors, which builds hand-eye coordination. Babies do not need to be inspired to grow. They grow. What baby humans need more than anything is as simple as what any mammal needs: comfort. And that's sort of in contrast to all this other sort of high-tech stuff you can buy. It's basically saying, like, you can learn just as well from just playing with paper and scissors as you can from whatever, like little baby Einstein stuff. And yeah, so and it just talks about how childhood has sort of turned into this like training ground for becoming a successful adult, but it also points out as well how parents are incentivized to do this in some ways, because if you don't, quote unquote, keep up, then you could fall out of this upper echelon,
right?
And so they sort of feel that pressure to continue on with the advantages. And they have a quote from Brian Jones, who had run for lieutenant governor of New York at the time recently. And he sort of just talks about how some of these incentives would go away if we had more of a social safety net. And yeah, so then going back to sort of the family as an economic unit thing, it talks about how, what the quote here is, but crucially, parents no longer respond to the state collectively. They are atomized consumers. And sort of this idea of like everyone just kind of takes care of their own children, doesn't think about these issues as being more structural. And yeah, it poses as a question here, I think is important. It says, what is at stake when some American children go to school hungry and others go to school in $1,000 bugaboo strollers? And just sort of like highlighting this differential sort of treatment of children. Yeah, and then and sort of again talking about some of this differential treatment, just sort of like the experiences children have with. It says like working class children had strong ties to siblings and extended family, and took ownership of their own play, but were actively encouraged to distrust authority figures such as teachers and doctors. And this has profound implications for the children's functioning in middle-class institutions and the rewards they receive, as opposed to, it says a little bit earlier, the sort of entitlement and the being encouraged to like negotiate that is instilled into like more upper-class children. And finally ends with a Toni Morrison quote about, she basically is talking about how we gotta take care of, or she wants to be able to take care of other people's children while they go off, and she says, your baby is beautiful and so are you, and honey, you can do it, and when you want to be a brain surgeon, call me, I will take care of your baby. And just kind of, and then just ends like highlighting this distinction between whose children were taken care of or not. So that's the article. I think it's a little bit different than a lot of stuff we picked, which is why I picked it. I don't think we've really discussed this issue before.
As parents ourselves, I'm surprised it hasn't come up yet.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was like one of my hesitations with whether I should pick it or not is just because I don't think either of us will necessarily have particular insights into the raising of children, but I do think the more significant part is just thinking about the sort of inequalities that get baked in from the beginning of our lives and what that means. But I don't know if you have anything you wanted to say first.
I like the thing that sort of struck me reading this was the quote from Brian Jones when he was sort of explaining that there wouldn't be such a hyper focus on the need to succeed if there were things like affordable housing or like guaranteed healthcare or like a living wage. If there was like living wages available to all like workers, like these sort of things that are sort of very antithetical to the American system sort of really push parents to be so hyper vigilant because like the system's so shot that like you want to make sure that they're on the right route to success immediately because of how dire the consequences can be, which is like something I like hadn't like thought like as like the like a reason or the reason why, but it was sort of very seems like obvious once you hear it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think it's a little strange because it's there. On one hand, there's so little social mobility, which was one of the points the article is making. But even with that, it still is very easy, especially going from, I guess, up. Like it's always easy. Like we're always, basically one step away from being homeless or whatever. Like if
Right.
you suffer some disability, like there's very few safety nets that are gonna like help you in this country and stuff. So as hard as it is to go to get out of poverty and stuff, it also is very easy if and when you do to then potentially fall back down. So
Right.
I don't know if it's a double-edged sword, just quite the right metaphor there, but the thing that came to my mind, so I said it.
Never stopped me before. So. I think the other thing that was like super fascinating was the system that they have in Finland, where since 1938, expectant parents are offered a box of clothing, sheets, and toys, or a cash grant of $190, and like 95% of them take the box, which includes things like diapers and ointments and clothing, picture books, pads, hairbrush, toothbrush, thermometer, sleeping bag, mattress, things like that. Which just seems like, yeah, like why wouldn't you? Like just in general, like why wouldn't that be a thing that's like offered to like parents? Is sort of like we need, like humans need to keep having babies, and like especially with like America in a quote unquote population crisis or whatever, like I mean there's things that like they can do besides just like a $50,000 hospital bill to incentivize like children, and this seems like a pretty not only easy but also like effective. Like they have the pull quote of a Finnish parent saying that it felt to me like evidence that someone cared, someone wanted our baby to have a good start in life, and now when I visit friends with young children, it's nice to see we share something common things. It strengthens the feeling that we're all in this together. Community. It's a little too close to communism, but community.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any population crisis, but I do think you see.
There's a worker crisis, Justin. So think a little.
But I did. There has been people haven't been having kids because of COVID for sure. I mean, I guess that does demonstrate that like the circumstances of society kind of dictate whether people are going to feel comfortable having kids or not, and because I think implicitly people have a sense that they are going to need support to raise children, but like the article was saying, it's just like there's no sense of collective organizing. It just then becomes like, oh, well, this isn't like a good time for me personally or whatever, rather than thinking about, oh, this isn't a good time for anyone. Why is that? How do
Right.
I change that?
Right.
Like COVID maybe is a little different, but obviously we botched the handling.
Not particularly, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was right in the beginning how it just pointed out that lack of mobility, and it connected it to how it affects welfare, because people still do sort of believe in it, and just thinking about like all the things that sort of get justified under this myth. Like I know people who will like defend a lot of like low wage jobs, whether it's like Walmart or Amazon or whatever, sort of under the guise of, oh, but it's like helping people or whatever, as if like you can go from Walmart cashier to Wall Street banker or something. I don't exactly know what these people like imagine, or if they just think like certain Walmart cashiers are rich. I mean, I don't think there's no rich Walmart cashiers. Like, you're either going to quit or it's just not happening.
It's the hustle, baby. It's all about the hustle.
But you still see people like defend if a Walmart or whatever comes in, or like, even I was listening to a different podcast called Trash Future.
What?
I know it happens.
There's no other podcast, Justin. Why'd you ever tell anybody there's something else they can listen
to? But they are talking about how like Amazon in their own sort of internal reportings will talk about how they're like raising wages and stuff, when that's just not it's just not true. Like, the wages go down whenever an Amazon comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Or even like prison, like people be like, oh, prison can rehabilitate people. It's like, it
sure
when
can.
we know it's just empirically not true. But so I just think that was a good point that can apply to stuff even beyond welfare.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other big point that I wanted to bring up was the critique of the nuclear family.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it comes up a lot, and I think lately I've been more open-minded to. I don't know if it's appropriate to call them a crowd, because I don't know. Like, I don't know. I'm just the circles I run in are probably increasingly small, but the crowd of people who's just like, we have to abolish the nuclear family and stuff like that. And I mean, I think that I think that people are well intentioned. I see where they're coming from. I don't know if I've totally gotten there yet, and I don't know if I ever will, because I think there's maybe a little bit of a romantic ideal in the idea that like your neighbors can just take care of your kids and stuff. I mean, ideally we would like to see that, but I also don't know if I wouldn't trust my kids to random neighbors necessarily. I mean, if I knew them well enough, and sure, but
yeah.
But that I don't want to get too far off topic. But the point is just that I think this article makes good points. If you want to make the case for sort of abolishing the nuclear family, just in terms of, well, I think even the article sort of in some ways frames it as like the nuclear family has been almost like corrupted by capitalism, but I think we can also just kind of think about how the nuclear family is working in tandem with capitalism in some ways, if we sort of think about how it gets constructed. I mean, that's one of the points that a lot of the people who are sort of against it will make, is just how relatively recent of an invention it is, and who sort of gets, who's sort of allowed to have a nuclear family,
right.
Especially if we think back to like slavery and the breaking up of the family and stuff like that. So so I just think that there's some good points on that, and like I said, my hesitations are still just that I think it is still nice to be able to have some amount of control over how you want to sort of raise your family, and I think it also is just nice to be able to have a group of people that you can call family, whether or not it's your quote unquote actual family or not. So I still have I definitely still have some questions about exactly what it would look like. But I just think this article makes a compelling case if you are on that side. I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
You're wrong, I guess. No. Yeah, I mean, like, I've always sort of been a somewhat big proponent of found family, I guess is the term anyways. It's sort of just like whatever. The sort of the hyper focus on the nuclear family, it's like, I guess, kind of super weird to anybody that didn't like grow up with that. Like, if like a parent wasn't there for some reason or another, like, it sort of seems like a useless metric. Like, if you were like, even just like your grandmother or like an aunt like babysitting or something, or like if you like live with like extra relatives or something. Like, I don't know when it started, so I guess I can't tell exactly politically like what incentivizes this sort of like championing of like it, but it's sort of I don't know, weird, dumb concept to me. Just from like my own like history growing up. So yeah, I mean, I'm all about it. And like, I mean, I know you never had to worry about being like a gifted student, but for some of us, I don't know. My mom was very good about not sort of putting a lot of pressure on some of those things of like pursuing them or like making sure that I'm like everything's getting done on time and perfect, and which is why the has no greater reflection on the quality of this podcast, actually.
Yeah, no, I was one of the quote unquote gifted students, which I feel like there's been
the fuck happened.
All these. The other, I did want to just touch on the quote I mentioned about tearing construction paper can be challenging and babies just grow. I think I do like that one because I think it does point to how like we don't necessarily need to be buying into like the capitalist notion of what childhood looks like and spending all this money on stuff. But I do think it maybe oversimplifies a little bit that how a baby is raised matters, which I think other parts of the article, are attentive to. So I'm not really sure why this one part oversimplifies it a little bit. But I mean, like, obviously how you raise a baby matters in terms of, like, you still have to give it the proper, like, care and attention. And there are, like, certain things that will help babies learn faster, slower, and whatever what you feed them can have long-term impacts on their development and things like that. Which, again, I'm not saying like you have to buy the gourmet baby food or something, but I'm just pointing out that it's more like it just has like italicized they grow, as if it's just like will automatically happen. It's not just like automatic. Like there are variables that go into it, but which is basically my point with the nuclear family, and just like I'm okay getting rid of it if there's some way that you can still sort of have. I still think it's nice to be able to have some say on those variables, I guess, is really the only point I'm making there. But and then the other, I think there's one line where it says, "Childhood has been reconceived not as a time to compensate for the alienated labor of adult life, but as a time to prepare for adult life." Which I just want to point out. I think for a lot of people, that's always been what childhood's been. I think it's been reconceived for more upper class white people, really. But if we look at like the longer history of whether it be like slave plantation sweatshops, even just like factories pre-child labor laws where they privileged children's small fingers to reach into machines and get chopped off. Or even just like rural environments where like children have to work on the farm. Like, I think it's a little bit the author's bias comes through there a little bit, and that they think childhood's being reconceived, but I think it's only being reconceived for a small group of people. And the quote from Annette LaRue, Loki, just like an incredibly racist quote. I don't think she's trying to be racist, but she starts off saying that she's like studying children's behavior, and she says the role of race was less powerful than I had expected, which is like, okay, like, right, if you just left it there, it would be like whatever. But then she says, she's talking about children who are being around their parents and for like leisure activities, and she says, in these situations, race made little to no difference. It was the middle-class children, black and white, who squabbled and fought with their siblings and talked back to their parents, where it's like, oh, so if you combine with the earlier quotes, like, oh, so you thought that that all the black children were just going to be talking back to their parents? I don't know. It reminded me of the that Bill O'Reilly clip where he like goes to a restaurant and is like surprised that the black people aren't cursing out the waiter, and he like portrays it as him being like open-minded. He's like, I couldn't believe they weren't like cursing out the waiter. It's like, No, it just means that you were racist. If
You're
so
the only one that can't believe it, actually. That's funny,
I
but true.
just thought that was funny.
Yeah.
All right, Alex, what do you have for us this week?
So this week I have a video from Al Jazeera English, the YouTube channel from March 2nd, 2017, called Noam Chomsky, The 5 Filters of the Mass Media Machine, which sort of breaks down, at least in part, his sort of his claim to fame is like sort of the big book that people know him for, the Manufacturing Consent from 1988, which was co-written by Edward Herman. So basically, I mean, it sort of breaks down and manufacturing. Also, I mean, I'll be sort of talking generally about manufacturing consent going forward, but this video is just sort of a nice in to it. But it's sort of the manufacturing consent sort of challenge the idea that the media acts as a check on political power, and that the media is meant to inform and serve the public to better serve in the political process. But in reality, media tells us what those the people in power, the powers that be, want, need us to hear to fall in line. And that media actually works as a propaganda machine to keep democracy staged as we know it, which is more or less in a failing state. And then it operates under 5 filters in order to manufacture consent. The first being ownership, which is that mass media firms are ultimately sort of big corporations. We know them often, which are even part of larger conglomerates. And profits can always be their ultimate goal, which sort of incentivizes them to obviously push whatever narrative grants the most profit. And so things like critical journalism will always be taking a backseat, playing second fiddle to the interests of the corporation. The second filter is the advertising money, which something I hadn't really thought about, but is sort of obvious when you hear it out loud, is that the cost of producing media, especially nowadays, is more than the consumers will ever pay, either probably willingly or even able to, especially. So to fill that cost gap, they need advertisers who are willing to sort of pay to have access to the audience, so that the media isn't just selling us the product of the information as well as what the advertiser sells, that the media is selling us to the advertisers as sort of a captive audience. It's not captive engaged, but maybe captive. The third filter is sort of the media elite, which sort of creates a situation where journalism is unable to be a check on power, because the system sort of encourages complicity. The governments, corporations, and institutions know how to influence the news narrative and feed the media. Government, corporations, and institutions know how to influence the news narrative, and they're able to do that by feeding the media, what we know as scoops, official accounts, and interviews with quote unquote experts, creating making themselves sort of an integral part of journalism, and then so that the people in power and the people who report are in bed together, as the video says. It's not even in a sexy way. And challengers to the system, sort of journalists with integrity, or sort of want to tell subversive narratives, are removed from the cycle, and sort of so they lose their access and ability to tell the stories. They're not invited on to news stations or something like that. So whistleblowers, journalists, and sources that stray away from the consensus get what is known as what they call flack, and flack is flack is the fourth filter. So that basically, when a story is inconvenient for those in power, the flack machine gets set in motion, which sort of discredits these sources, trashes the stories, and as needed diverts the conversation sort of away from it entirely. And the last filter, sort of to manufacture this consent, finally you're going to need a target, which is the fifth filter of the common enemy. Some examples given are communism, terrorism, and immigrants, which is ultimately just a boogeyman that puts fear into the public opinion and helps corral everybody's attention how they want it to be sent. Consent, the video ends with consent is being manufactured all around us all the time. I guess I'll just say that it's narrated by Amy Goodman. Very sort of, I don't know, kind of nightmarish illustrations that I liked, but they were sort of very alarming. And animated by Pierangelo Pirek, and then the music was by Eric Samothrakis. It's a theory, it's a little crackpot for me. But what I guess I kind of wanted to spend the time, because I don't have anything to really comment on it, is I just can't believe how bad Hamas is unilaterally, and how much we all should support Israel as a moral right. But I don't know what you have to say, Justin.
Yes, obviously that's a parody from Alex.
It's funny because when I said that, when I thought of like how to like segue in, I was like, actually, that's a timeless reference. They can't date. They can't date this episode by saying that there has been bombings in the Gaza Strip by, the good guys, right? Of the Zionists. You know, it's just like it's weird because it's not since World War II. I mean, it's always been the good guys. It's kind of nice to be on that side. You're like, wow, like we're just moral superiority the entire way, and we're stronger. So it's like you get to punch down, but on the bad guy. It's like pretty nutty.
Yeah, well, just for the sake of viewers who might not be paying as much attention, yeah, I mean, I think the Palestinian liberation struggle is a good sort of way into this, because I think most people living in America definitely have had the experience of either just being told that this is a complicated issue that you can't possibly understand, and there's way too many moving parts,
I mean,
or
I have an opinion on it, but you, who doesn't agree with me, it's too complicated for you to have an opinion, of course.
or have just sort of been fed the lies that Israel are somehow the good guys and are defending themselves from these terrorist attacks, quote unquote, without any discussion of what exactly is making the Palestinians feel like they need to fight back. Like that conversation is completely left out, and again, that's just kind of like a racist narrative, in the sense that it's like there's a sense that the Palestinians couldn't possibly have good reasons because they're just brown people fighting against these lighter skinned Jewish people. So, and yeah, I mean, yeah. I would put it this way: if the races were reversed, you would not see the narrative being spun the same way. Which is why I think we've definitely seen a lot of Black and African Palestinian solidarity happening historically and in the current moment as well. Yeah, obviously, I don't want to. Obviously, Jewish people have and continue to face a lot of discrimination as well, but I think we need to separate Jewish people from what the state of Israel, led by Benjamin Netanyahu, is doing.
May the Lord protect him.
And but another way into this video too that may be related is like, if you look, I don't know if you noticed, but did you look just below the video?
Oh, is funded in whole or in part by the Kurdi government?
Qatari government.
Excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, and like it talks about sort of how news sources, I think that you said that were like subversive, are going to be attempted to be discredited because you only see this warning by Al Jazeera. Well, I shouldn't say only, but two places you see are Al Jazeera and Russia Today has a similar one that says it's funded by the Russian government. But you don't see that warning by PBS, that's funded by America, CBC, that's funded by Canada, or BBC, that's funded by Britain. And so again,
Al Jazeera sounds a little brown to me, Justin. I think it's probably for the best.
I mean, there's no, like, I've had this conversation with my friends, and they'll at first try and like explain it away, but there really is no logical explanation for why YouTube, which is, I mean, maybe based in America, but is accessible anywhere. Yeah, but in theory accessible anywhere. I mean, obviously some places have restrictions, but why they would be picking which governments need to have a warning put next to them, and if you look at the content
with a
of
Wikipedia hyperlink, no less.
And if you look at
funded in whole, sorry, Al Jazeera is funded in a whole or in part by the Qatari government. Wikipedia, anyway.
But if you look at the content that these channels put out, it's like Al Jazeera and Russia Today are much more likely to be critical of these Western governments. I mean, PBS, could put out some good stuff. I'm not saying that they're all bad, but they're not as likely to be putting out major news stories that are going to be critical, and that's the real reason why you don't see any warning next to them. Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of ironic that the video's point is proven if you just literally glance below it.
That's funny and true. I didn't even really notice that. But why am I seeing this? Because you can look and see why am I seeing this. Information panel providing publisher content. If a channel is owned by a news publisher that is funded by government or publicly funded, an information panel publisher context may be displayed on the watch page. It's meant to give you additional information to help you better understand the sources of news content that you watch on YouTube. Inclusion of the information panel and provided publisher content is based on information about the news publisher made available by Wikipedia and other independent third-party sources. It's not a comment by YouTube on the publisher video's editorial direction or on the government's editorial influence. So, how does it feel to be so wrong, Justin?
But again, that maybe is doing a lot of work there, because it's like, it's like, oh well, what's going into the decision of whether that is
right?
Again, you can cut through that fog pretty clearly. The other comment I wanted to make about this, or no, it's not really about this, but which I didn't realize that this is part of a longer playlist. It's called Media Theorized, Reading Against the Grain. They have the next videos from summarizing some stuff by Edward Said, and then they have one from Stuart Hall, Roland Barthes, and Marshall McLuhan, who are all academic type people. But the Stuart Hall one, I think I have actually a long time ago mentioned on the show Stuart Hall's Encoding Decoding, which I actually think is a little bit more nuanced of a take on this. But Stuart Hall is
if you're into that sort of thing.
Stuart Hall is a Caribbean intellectual, but and you can watch the video too, or read the essay. I think if you just Googling Stuart Hall encoding decoding, you can find a free PDF of it. But he talks about in that one basically how actually the consumer sort of plays a role in the media, in terms of the media wants you to has their own sort of agenda, not even necessarily like smoke-filled room agenda, but is trying to accomplish something. But they also have to sort of take into account what viewers are going to want, and in some cases this just takes the role of like, your Fox News viewer wants to see good news on Trump, and so Fox shows good news on Trump. But that Stuart Hall also does allow us to then think about these sort of people who are able to resist some of this propaganda, I guess, and and that's how you do also end up with these outlets that are able to do the subversive stuff, because there are audiences for, and that there's. And yeah, basically it's just that there's different types of audience and different types of audience reactions that are constantly producing a feedback loop between the media and the consumer.
I hear you, Justin, but I'd rather it not be my fault at all. So I don't know about that one, Chief, I'm going to be honest.
Well, I guess in this case we are the media, though, if you think about it.
Oh, huge. Okay, so I'm fine being like the big bad. I just don't want to be like I don't know, complacent peon.
Oh, I think I've mentioned this too before. Actually, I like the point of thinking about who funds the news that this show makes. I think I made it before with like Robert Mercer funding Breitbart and stuff like that. I think if people knew more often who's bankrolling their news, they might be like, "Oh, wait, is there something else going on here?" But I think people too often just kind of think of the news as like the news, like it's like somehow like unfiltered, unbiased. And
so I always respected Dennis Prager for his name right there. Like, you know what? Yeah, this guy's all right.
Yeah, I think the point makes about access is another one of those sort of double-edged swords where it's tough, because I think there is some value to having access. I mean, obviously it corrupts you, and I don't really trust most of these places with access, and it's definitely overrated. But you do occasionally get stories that can only come by virtue of someone having access.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a little bit tricky to navigate and probably, yeah, there's probably points to larger systemic issues, I guess, because I don't think that one, I guess what I'm saying is I don't think the answer is just completely no journalists should have access and that somehow that will make the media overall better. I think it is also a problem if there is zero access, if that makes sense. So
Yeah, you're
yeah.
pro sleeper cell. That's fine. It's a hot take. I'll give it to you credit for sure. I wouldn't have said it, but
yeah, I think that's all I have. I don't know if you have anything else.
no, I kind of really just want to do that Israel-Palestine bit.
That's good. Are you about to make an inappropriate joke about Palestinians needing a safe room? Or
About what?
about Palestinians needing a safe room?
Oh no! Oh, that's huge. Oh, well, you know what? That's a good point, Justin. No, I won't make that joke. I would formally like to change the name of the safe room to the Iron Dome. We need a simple 50-50 split, so 50% vote. I vote yes. Motion passed. Huge.
All right, Alex. Now that we're in the safe room, what do you have on your mind?
All right, on my mind is, and this is not I don't know if this is like a sequel, a reboot, continuation, something, season 2, but you know, I had already made a safe room about how everybody's at best a mediocre. You're assuming that you're a mediocre to bad driver. I got a solution to mediocre bad, the plague of the mediocre driver. Eggs. All right. Here's the system. Tell me, this is less of a complaint and more of a formal proposal to the government of Justin. You see, now here, let me run you through a little hypothetical here. You're driving, right? You're on the throughway. It's rush hour traffic that you're stuck in. Then you just see a guy just ride on, like, you're trying to merge in. Everybody's kind of every other car's letting somebody in, whatever. It is what it is. But then you just see a guy just ride the shoulder all the way up, passing 10, 15, 20 cars, doesn't give even half of the shit. And then he just goes, and you honk, and he flips you off anyways, even though you're right, and then you both just go on with your days. And then what? Okay, you got a honk. Who's that good for? You throw an egg at his car? Now he has to go through the car. You blew 15 minutes of his time, cost him $10. No actual damage, whatever. Listen, you're driving down the road, there's a sidewalk. You got somebody just sort of jaywalking, gallivanting, some little shithead kid, probably with middle to low income parents, so he's not a priority anyways. You know what I'm saying? We learned this already today, thanks to you. He's running around, or just an adult. Kids, take the lead. Adult knows better. Just walking on the side, like in the middle of the street, and you're like, hey man, I gotta go, and you like honk to get out of the road, and they just flip you off because you can't commit like vehicular manslaughter. Then just fucking peg them in the head with an egg. You were right, they were wrong. It's very subjective, but I think I got something here. I'm not accepting notes, but I am accepting unabashed praise. So keep that in mind with what your next comment's going to be.
So everyone is just going to start carrying an egg. How many eggs in their car?
Well, okay, so that's the thing. So, like, if you want, see, okay, I didn't even think about this, but that's
I know.
No, but it's good. It's better because, you want to be, I'm going to be a dick and I'm going to bring 20 eggs, but then you forget about the eggs. Your car smells like rotten eggs. It sort of, it polices itself.
Well, I mean, that's another question too. Who determines whether or not you were correct in throwing the egg?
Now, I know that you think this is a gotcha question, but ultimately me. And that's not a loaded answer, and that really doesn't need further explanation.
So to go back to your initial example, so someone rides past 15 cars on the shoulder, they all throw an egg at him?
Yeah! Oh, that's huge, dude! Yeah, they should! That's way better, yeah. Yeah, so, every single person that's been trespassed gets an egg throw. Yeah, that's way better, yeah.
But are all 15 of those people also carrying multiple eggs in their car as well?
I mean, if you're not feeling particularly angry, you can bring no eggs, but I would consider at least one in a cup holder. I mean, yeah, they should all, like, everybody, you're sort of responsible for your own eggs. If you want government, I can get government issued egg. Yeah.
Are there enough eggs to do? Do you have to pay for the egg? What about like, what if you're someone who's experiencing homelessness and doesn't have food or something? Like, do you get eggs as
Oh,
well?
I like that. Yeah, everybody's government issued a dozen eggs. Yeah, why not? I mean, I was ultimately thinking you just sort of have to, what you would pay for the egg yourself. There would just be sort of no legal recourse for throwing an egg at somebody in that situation. Okay, maybe, all right, you throw an egg at somebody and they can sort of formally declare that you've committed a battery and assault against them by throwing that egg. And then it goes to court, and then the judge is allowed to sort of give a moral ruling of like, no, you deserve to have an egg thrown at you. Like, there's like, the legal consequence of throwing an egg at somebody criminally is removed if you're proven to have been morally correct. But I think you'd buy the eggs. I don't support factory farming, but I might as well take advantage of it while it's here. Eggs are alarmingly cheap, to the detriment of chickens. I don't support it, but I will use it.
I was gonna say, isn't this going to increase the
Yeah,
factory farming and the
I think if
brutality against chickens?
you buy eggs, there'll be like eggs for that purpose, like for throwing at people, and it'll be like a sort of 1-to-1, all profits and expenses are led to sort of ending factory farming for chickens and sort of encouraging free range growth and farming. I'm kind of knocking this out of the park, I think. Not gonna lie.
Now, what if you throw the egg and you miss? Who's
Uh-huh.
responsible for cleaning that up?
Kind of same for, I think, okay, create jobs. Yeah, it's kind of like, I mean, I think there should probably be people like cleaning this, like there should be, people should be paid, you should be compensated for sort of cleaning general, like, cleaning the streets up, sort of very quite literally. I think that's a good source of job, and it sort of will increase everybody's sort of quality of life. And you only get one egg. I don't know if that's where I thought you were going. You only get one egg. If you miss, like, tough titties, get better at throwing.
I thought, didn't you say earlier you got issued a dozen eggs? I thought.
Well, you get one egg per trespass. You can bring as many eggs as you want. Okay, you can bring I'm gonna go with, you have to buy your own eggs, and then sort of with the incentivized, subsidy, like, encouraging free range chickens. You can get as many eggs as you want. You're only allowed to throw one per person per trespass, but you can have as many on you as you want.
Okay, so now we're back to so now people who are need food are no longer getting eggs. They just have to watch the eggs get wasted.
It's not a wholly bad faith argument, because we're both sort of preoccupied with ending the homelessness and sort of increased poverty. I think a person that in that situation couldn't really do anything with a raw egg anyways.
And they could cook it.
They could cook it, but I mean, I guess
if it's hot enough, they could cook it right on the sidewalk.
See, now you're being a dick. See, I don't need this is this is a wholly academic conversation, and I will not have bad faith actors be part of the dialogue. No, I think, okay, so incentivize free range chickens, and then also, I think probably there's probably an organization called, and it's probably just a tax loophole for somebody wealthy. But we'd start our own sort of government profit sort of thing of like, profits will be split between ending factory farming for chickens, and then also with soup kitchens and things like that. But there's probably a better answer than a soup kitchen, but we'll start there.
There's probably a lot of better answers, but
well, yeah, I mean, housing and actually just feeding people. But I mean,
I went to every single question that was asked.
Every single question, there's a better answer than soup kitchen, or every single question that I've answered has had a better answer than the one I gave.
Yeah.
I feel like I did a lot better than either of us, but especially I thought I would with this. I'm kind of gassing myself up, actually.
Oh, well, luckily for you, this is the safe room, so
the Iron Dome.
I won't. I'll let the audience make up their own mind on.
We'll remember me as a hero.
Yeah, something like that.
All right. Fine, Justin. What do you got? So, what are you so fucking smarmy about over there?
All right. So my safe room for this week is that, and this is really a piece of self-care advice, but don't take yourself too seriously. People's initial reaction might be to think that this is sort of like the cliche don't be a narcissist, like, and then their mind immediately goes to, like, someone like Donald Trump or something, like just someone who thinks way too highly of themselves and is taking themselves too seriously or whatever. And that's part of it, but that's not even really my focus. I mean, yeah, don't be that person either. But really, what I mean is, I think one of the ways that you see it manifested just in sort of everyday life is people who will kind of assume, and I'm sure lots of people have been guilty of this at some point, but people will just kind of assume that someone's like thinking about that embarrassing thing you did 2 weeks ago or whatever. Where it's like in reality, that person forgot about it that night and hasn't thought of you once since. But
Right.
but you're sitting there being like, oh, I bet that person is thinking about me right now. It's like that's also a form of narcissism, and you really break it down. Like,
Yeah, right.
not everyone is constantly thinking about you for better or worse. But I feel like people don't usually think about that as like a form of narcissism because it's like negative or whatever. But then I think the other place that we see this, which is maybe more of a contemporary phenomenon in some ways, although not entirely, but has maybe been exacerbated, is on like Twitter, especially on these like bigger accounts where you post something and inevitably some people aren't going to like it, are going to just be trash talking in the replies or whatever, and people just kind of taking it incredibly personally, which I think about as taking yourself too seriously in the sense of it should be kind of obvious in some ways that once you have enough people commenting on something, obviously some people are not going to like it. It has nothing to do with you or the thing you said. It's just like obviously if there's only like one or two people commenting on your thing, they might both be your friends or whatever. They might be nice or whatever. But if you have 10,000 people commenting, I mean, what do you think of yourself to be aghast that a few people are talking trash? Like, you thought you were like, some angel incarnate or something? Like, what is like, it doesn't make any, of course people are talking trash. And like,
It's our favorite thing in the world.
I mean, the thing that really like inspired this, although this is not the only example, obviously, is I just recently watched the Lindsay Ellis video, which I'm a fan of Lindsay Ellis for the most part, or at least I watch most of her videos. But yeah, she just made an hour and 40-minute video that was about how she was quote unquote canceled for this tweet, and the video is just very like rambly, and I don't know who it was for. Like, part of it seemed like it was like an apology, part of it seemed like it was like standing her ground, I guess. I mean, yeah, it seemed like she was just trying to like somehow like appeal to the people that agreed with her and disagreed with her at the same time. Nothing about it really
Always a
made
wise
sense.
choice.
And and like I said, it was just 100, 100 minutes long, and it's like, do you really think so much of yourself that you think that me sitting on the couch at 8 o'clock at night cares enough to watch 100-minute video? I mean, I watched it just because
I was gonna say, not to be fair,
but I didn't enjoy it. I just watched it because I was like,
but it was bad.
I was curious to see what this video is going to be. But yeah, I'm like, but I didn't watch it thinking like, yeah, this is great. She's really making some great points and knocking out of the park. I'm like, wow, she's obsessed with Twitter. Like, I'm like, wow, she really thinks her Twitter account is something special. Okay, it's interesting. Yeah, I don't understand where this urge comes from. Like I said, other people have done it too, and just don't think so highly of yourself. The last point I'll make on this is just, I think a lot of I think you saw it kind of in like early 2000s hip hop with a lot, and I think people at the time didn't necessarily understand it or made fun of it or whatever. I'm not sure why, but they did. But was just like this mindset of like, haters are my motivators, and like if you don't have haters, you're not working hard enough, blah blah. And it's like, okay, but they're right though, in the sense, or at least people would be better off if they adopted that mindset, because way too often we see people being like, oh, I have haters, like, no, I gotta just like talk to them and get them to like me. It's like, no, if you're the hip-hop artists already told you 2 decades ago, like, once you get big enough, people are gonna hate that. The end. Like, that's just how life is. If you should be like, oh, I have haters, that means I made it. Like, the end.
To be honest, a hater should be like, let the hate flow through you. Shout out George Lucas. Like, what just impeccable advice. Honest to God, Justin.
Mm-hmm.
Just let them stay mad. Like, that sounds like a them problem. Hating on your game hating on my game doesn't make yours any stronger.
Exactly.
Not enough of a roast culture. I think everybody's, you gotta have a little bit of tough skin, and you gotta sort of you can't take everything so. Even if it is incredibly personal, that's the number one reason to not take it personally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like, if they're making like death threats or something, like, sure, report them.
Kill them. Well, at least hit him with an egg. I mean, my God, at least an
egg. Yeah, I'm not saying like all cyberbullying is created equal or that. Like, I do think sometimes it can go far enough where you might need to take action to protect yourself. But just the people who are like, oh, if you really think about it, this is racist because, and then like, and I mean, no, I'm not, obviously some stuff is racist, but like in the Lindsay Ellis case, it was just like people were just trying to go like galaxy brain to say, and whatever. It's probably not worth it at this point to go back into. You can look it up. It was the tweet you had about Raya and the Last Airbender, if you care to. Yeah, but it's like the tweet itself wasn't that bad, but people just had to like try and up their clout by hating on it, and yeah, that's just what it means to have thousands of followers. People are gonna be trying to hate. Yeah,
I mean, they didn't have anything interesting to say, so don't let that censor you. My God,
that'll do it for our show this week. See the show notes for a link to view the artifacts for yourself and view the endnotes.
Artwork for the podcast is by JAS Art Studios, and music was produced by Nicholas Pizzuto.
Rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, follow us on Facebook, and tell a friend or enemy about the show. Join us again eventually.
Say it. 3 weeks.
In
Tri-weekly, baby.
In 3 weeks as we find 2 new texts to discuss. The horse that tested positive for steroids or whatever, and then the trainer said that his horse is a victim of cancel culture.
No! Okay, I did see, because I think you kind of got me onto John Boy Media with all the baseball stuff, and I listen to their podcast every once in a while, and I think they're talking about a horse being disqualified. They're like, do you tell the horse, do you let him know what happened? I think that's hilarious, and I guess that's probably why they were talking about that. The horse is a victim of cancel culture. That's... Okay, here's the thing. That unironically could be the best bit of like the 2020s. If there's any shred of irony there, that dude is like god tier.
I don't think so. He said it on Fox News. I think he was dead serious. Yeah.
Did you see that one video of whatever one of those fucking Fox News pricks names is that has like the slick back, like sort of salt and pepper, like black hair, but like the dude that was like petting his dog, and he's like, can I just do a quick shout out or whatever?
No.
Oh, it's so... I gotta see if I can find it. But like the dude was like some vet or something, like a real classic like Fox News dude, dogs in the military or whatever, and he goes, yo, can I get a quick shout out? And the dude's like very clearly the anchor's like not like super on board with it, but he kind of like lets it go because I don't know why. And he's like, hey man, I just want to say shout out to my mom, my wife, my dad, and FC didn't kill himself.